Hi, welcome to the Wildflower Center greenhouse. I'm going to do a planting demonstration for you. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do here is I'm going to be planting this little verbena, this prairie verbena, into this glazed pot. And I've selected the verbena purple color that would go with the purple stripe that's on the pot, just getting a little artsy there. I've also selected this pot because it's a good size. This little verbena in a 4-inch pot might seem a little small to begin with, but it'll eventually fill in, actually fairly quickly will fill in. And this is a good size volume of soil for the root zone of this plant when it becomes mature size. So that's the first step. And then I've also selected this pot because it's glazed, which is a nice aesthetic look, but it also has a drainage hole in the bottom. And that's really important. You want it, most plants, you want to have a good drainage. If you have a pot that doesn't have a hole in it, you have to have very specific plants that will tolerate sitting in soggy soil. So this is a good combination here. And then a lot of people like to put pottery shards in the bottom of your pot. And most of us that have gardens also have dead pottery that we can break into little pieces and use to cover up the hole. Some people say that they're using it for improving drainage, and the way it works in my head is that it prevents, if you have pottery shards, kind of covering that hole, you want them to be loosely covering it so that water drains through. But what you're doing is you're preventing the soil from compacting and plugging up that hole, which can, obviously if the hole's plugged up, you're not going to have good drainage. So the arrangement that I'm going to have is sort of stacking the pieces of pottery so that there's a little bit of space underneath that covers up the hole. So I'll start with that. I'll put the pottery in there, and then I want to fill up the pot most of the way. I want to make sure that I have enough space so that when the plant is in the pot, that the root zone is right at the soil level that it is in the pot that it's growing in. So that seems actually about right. You can adjust it. You can add a little bit more soil if you like, if it's not high enough, or you can kind of slope up the soil along the sides of the pot. That's another thing that you can do to make the hole a little bit deeper. Then I'm going to take the plant out of the pot, which I'll start by just gently massaging the root zone around the pot and very carefully cover the top of the plant without squishing it, flipping it upside down, maybe give it a little tap, and then the pot comes right off. Those roots look really nice. They're fully rooted in, but they're not totally root bound, so that's good. If it's a root bound plant, you might want to gently loosen up the root zone. Some people like to cut them. I think that's more damage than you need to do. Just gently pulling them apart is usually effective enough. And then put your plant in the pot. Again, you want to make sure that once the whole thing is put together that your plant isn't too low or too high. If it's too low, then you're going to be bearing the crown of the root, the crown of the plant, which will encourage it to rot, which is not what you want. And if it's too high, you might have roots that are exposed, and that's not good either. So that looks about right, and I can adjust it a little bit as we go. So next I'm going to just fill in some more soil. What you want to make sure that you do when you finish putting the rest of the soil in is tucking the soil in around the base of the 4-inch pot. You don't want to have any major air pockets in there. So I'm just packing it in with my fingers. And I'll finish filling it up here. So ultimately, when I'm done here, I'm going to give it a little shake that helps settle it out. That looks about right. So again, what's really, really critical here is getting the soil level right and making sure that your plant isn't too high or too low. This is pretty much the end result. The only thing that you need to do next is give it a good watering. And I'm going to just very gently water the plant and let it soak in a little bit. Just like with a sponge, if it's a dry sponge, you might have to get it wet a couple times for it to rehydrate. If it's wet already, then it tends to absorb more moisture. So I'm going to do this a couple times. If you're really serious, you want to make sure that your plant is totally soaked in. You might put it in a nice fancy container like this, something that doesn't have drainage in it, and you can actually soak the plant in it for a little while. Just put some water in the bottom of that pot and let it sit for an hour. That's probably adequate. And that way you know that you have a fully saturated root zone in your pot. And that just settles the soil. It settles the soil around the roots of the plant and makes sure that it's nice and watered in. And then you might just need to check it after you've planted it up periodically to see if it needs more watering. Finally, what I'm not going to do, but you could certainly do it, is to do some kind of mulch on top. And you can use really any kind of mulch that you would in a garden situation as long as it's not too coarse. So you might use crushed glass or pine bark mulch, or something, pecan mulch works really well too, gravel, so anything like that. So there you go.